the gun maker, and they were so exact because the manufacturing of those guns has gotten down to micromillimeters of exactness. They could not tell on test firing one gun and then test firing the other gun. They couldn't tell the bullets apart anymore. Now, those guns, and how often is that going to happen, that you have two guns from the same lot being used? Very rare. Yeah. But as we've gotten more and more exact, how many different, how far apart in the manufacturing stream do the guns have to be before they become unique again?
There's some science.
So the science itself is very exacting in terms of being able to determine some things, but at the same time, our manufacturing is catching up.
The science is working that way too. I mean,
of course it is. We're getting better at making things, and that is making things more similar. There are duplicates over and over of you know, when people are making things in a factory, they want them to be measured in millimeters. Micromillimeters to fit every single time.
So that rifling and the guns gets that close to one another, you're never going to be able to figure out.
It becomes more difficult, and so while the science is getting better, sometimes it's getting worse because of what we're doing on the other end of the spectrum. It makes it very difficult to keep up with this also in terms of, is that now is it possible for an expert to come in and take the stand anymore and say that is a unique firing pin?
It's the way it was always done, and I'm sure that's the way we both learned it in law school. But you know, an expert is an expert and an expert if you can get them qualified. But it raises some doubts too. You know, there's the popular myth, and well, I think all lawyers are involved with this. I mean, I do some court-appointed work as well, and my clients generally tell me they're innocent, and you know, my job is to listen to everything they said and help them through, as you well know. But the popular myth is that every prison, everyone in prison claims to be innocent. I don't know if that's true. I mean, but I watch enough movies to, you know, but how would you sift through the bogus claim? This is a good question. I mean, okay, you got there, there's a prisoner there, and he said he's innocent. But then again, so does his cellmate and everybody all around him and whatever. How do you sift through this, Tim, to figure out what would be a case that, yeah, he might be innocent?
I think there are two things going on here in that question, and I'll answer one piece first about that myth of everybody in prison claiming their innocence. I've represented thousands of people in my career as a public defender, and many of them proclaimed innocent who the evidence strongly suggested otherwise. Ultimately, though, you have to remember in our system, 95 and in many instances 98% of people accused of a crime plead guilty. At the end of the day, they stand up in court and say, I did it. They don't then go to prison and start proclaiming their innocence. The vast majority of those people go to prison and serve their time. The vast majority of cases aren't even appealed.
I see.
And so those cases literally end at that moment in terms of contesting their guilt.
That takes a lot off the board for you right there.
Removes a huge chunk. And so the myth is just that. It's a myth. There aren't vast numbers of people in prison claiming innocence. There are 50,000 people in Ohio prisons today. When, if we back up for a moment, it was a number of years ago we put our first statute on the books allowing prisoners to request DNA comparisons in cases. So if they were convicted back in the 80s and 90s when there wasn't DNA available, or even when they were convicted recently but DNA testing wasn't done even though there was biological evidence, there were statutes on the book that started to allow DNA testing for people in prison. The big debate at the State House when this law was being considered to give prisoners this right was, oh, we're going to open the floodgates. We're going to be crushed under the request.
That's what could have crossed my mind. I mean, all 50,000 of them, but...
This has been on the books for, the DNA statutes in one form or another have now been on the books for, I believe, 7-8 years.
Oh.
There have been 400 requests.
Oh, quite manageable.
Oh, and what's really interesting is because we're so afraid as a society about those floodgates being open, we created fairly significant barriers to getting the testing done. So what we've done is spent a huge amount of money litigating whether we should even allow this prisoner to get testing done. it would have been easier just to test them all on demand. It would have been far cheaper for the taxpayer too, who is paying for the prosecution and defense in those litigations. If you had just tested on demand, when a prisoner says it, I want DNA testing done on the evidence.
Test them.
Just test it. Just test it and get it over with. In many cases, there's not any more biological evidence because it wasn't stored or wasn't stored correctly. But in the cases that it was existent, just test it. Go ahead and do it.
Well, you've addressed. I think that's a good word that we've thrown out here is a myth, because I guess even in our own little community here, I mean, if you go down to the common pleas court on any given day, we have something called change of plea, and I've represented numerous people myself, and you just wait your turn, and after some discussion with the prosecutor, the guy basically says he did it, and I'm ready to be sentenced, and make sense of the 50,000 people who reside in our prisons. A vast majority did that. So this is a question that we'll hear it out here. Walk us through the process. Let's just say that I'm the inmate in an Ohio prison, and I didn't commit the crime, so I didn't plead out, and I didn't do it. I mean, I never said I did, even though I didn't have to say I did, but I'm convicted anyway. How would I get in touch with the Wrongful Conviction Project? In other words, I'm in prison. I'm watching this show, or my loved one told me about it, and says, I'd really like to connect with these people. How do you do that?
It's as simple as writing us a letter. That's all it takes. There's no special form. There's no special request. My office runs an intake division, and we get letters every day from prisoners across Ohio, and many of them are requesting assistance of one form or another, but a number of them write and say, I'm innocent. This project then takes those letters, and this probably goes back to answering the other question, the prior question a little bit, and the floodgates didn't open, but you still want to make sure it's a wrongful conviction project. This isn't an appeal project. There was some legal error in my case,
or my rights were violated. Conviction. The guy didn't do it.
Didn't do the case. Not I wasn't the shooter, I just brought the gun, or I just drove the car. This is I didn't do it. Those are the cases we're looking for. And so part of the other weeding process of looking for the needle in the haystack of the requests that come in, when they write us a letter, we send back a very long questionnaire. That was the other big piece of the development of this project, was developing a very, very lengthy questionnaire, a number of pages long, asking a number of very specific questions about your case, what happened in it, who were the witnesses, what was the evidence they used, do you have alibi witnesses,
and then you'll go from there.
Where were you? And we have a very strong cover letter that goes with it. It says we require your absolute cooperation in this. This is not about answer the questions you want to answer and skip the bad ones, or don't provide the questions that you want to use for us. It is answer every single question, answer them absolutely truthfully. If we find out you're lying, misleading us, we simply will not continue to review your case.
Well, Tim, I see our time has slipped by. A very interesting topic. I'd like to thank you for being our guest on Law Talk. To view this episode of Law Talk and others, go to www.czclep.org. I am John Celebrezze, and I thank you for tuning in to Law Talk.
To keep up on Medina County and other legal issues, go to www.czcourtreporter.com, a function of the Celebrezze-Zangi Community Legal Education Project. At CZ-CLEP, we're devoted to the education of today's legal issues. Fueled by the public's keen interest in our legal system and current events, CZ-CLEP is dedicated to the educational venues aimed at enhancing the understanding by all citizens. For a complete listing of dates and times for this telecast, tune in to WCTV Channel 15 or log on to wadsworthcity.com and follow the links to WCTV.
I'm John Celebrezze. Please join me in getting a better understanding of the law.